Welcome to Your Pharmacy Career podcast, proudly brought to you by Ravens Recruitment, Australia's leading specialist pharmacy recruitment agency. The podcast series has been created to shine a light on the diverse and inspiring careers of Australia's pharmacists. Each episode will focus on the varied career opportunities within the pharmacy industry by exploring the career paths taken by leaders in the fields of community pharmacy, hospital, industry, government and professional organisations. Careers never follow a defined path. Everyone's story is different and unique in their own way. The podcast series will help you discover the world of opportunities that exist and reveal pathways to achieve your dreams and aspirations. Whether you are a pharmacy student, early career pharmacist, or simply looking for a change at any stage of your career, the podcast series is designed to help you navigate ways into a career and a life that you love. Your host of the podcast series is Ali Sue. Ali, herself a pharmacist, is now the founder of Global Pharmacy Entrepreneurs and a passionate advocate for pharmacists to grow, innovate, excel, and make a lasting impact in the world. It's now over to our host, Ali Sue.
Welcome to the third episode of Your Pharmacy Career podcast. I'm Ali Sue. Today, we're very excited to have Associate Professor Faye McMillan on our show. Faye is a Wurundjeri woman from Tralee, New South Wales. In 2001, Faye was the first Indigenous pharmacist to become a registered pharmacist in Australia. Faye is the 2019 New South Wales Aboriginal Woman of the Year, Senior Atlantic Fellow for Social Equity, and a founding member of Indigenous Allied Health Australia. Faye works at Charles Sturt University as the Director of Djirruwang Program, Bachelor of Health Science, Mental Health. It's a program dedicated solely to the education of Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people for the mental health workforce. In this episode, Faye shared with us her journey of becoming the first Indigenous pharmacist in Australia. We also discussed the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous health and education opportunities. Faye's story has inspired a greater understanding of Australian Indigenous history, embracing cultural safety and racial equality. As pharmacists and future pharmacists, we're in the perfect position to understand, to support, and to care for the community regardless of their color, gender, or race. Without further ado, let's welcome Faye. Hi Faye, how are you?
Good morning, Ellie. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining our podcast. What amazing achievements you've had. We can't wait to get to know your story.
Can I firstly just start by acknowledging the traditional custodians on all of the lands in which people will either listen or see this podcast, and acknowledge the continued connection to land, seas and country for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations, and thank them for their collective wisdom that they share every day with the broader Australian community. With regards to my story, I grew up sort of moving around a little bit, but I think most of my really formative years, so, starting primary school and things like that, was in my hometown of Trangie, which is central west of New South Wales, so a town of 1,000 people, and grew up with my mum and my grandmother and my 4 siblings in a very loving house, not always wealthy, but we were certainly wealthy in love and connectedness, and ultimately ended back up in Trangie, which is where I started my career in pharmacy as the shop assistant, and then moved to a dispensary technician after the pharmacist supported me to do the dispensary technician course. The rest, they say, is history, I think, with regards to, through life circumstances, I ended up having to move away from Trangie and looking at what were my career options. And I had loved working in pharmacy, being part of the community, which I see, pharmacists very much part of the communities in which they serve. And so really enjoyed that aspect. So thought, I'll study to be a pharmacist. I was 27 and a little naive.
So next question is really asking about your role models in your life and mentors in your life. What are some of the lessons you've learned from those people who shaped your career?
So there's obviously family role models that I certainly look to and continue to do so today. And they are my mother and my grandmother, mum's siblings, as well as my own siblings. They are amazing human beings in their own right. And I'm very thankful that not only do I love them because they're my family, but I also admire them for their tenacity and role modelling. When I did move back to Trangie, one of the great things was the opportunity to spend more time with my maternal grandmother, who was an inspiration to all of her family with regards to her resilience
Mm,
in the face of adversity,
mm,
particularly growing up in an era where being Aboriginal was very, very challenging and understanding what that meant. But it also gave me such a beautiful insight into her as a person, not just
mm,
as my grandmother, but certainly the pharmacist in Trangie at the time, Peter Dixon. He was so supportive of the opportunity that I could have to go to university.
mm,
So Peter, and there was, other pharmacists around the Trangie area, in Warren and Gilgandra and other small rural and remote towns that Peter worked with, that I was very fortunate to be able to be part of that extended network. And so they really did shine a light for me as to how crucial the role of a pharmacist is to the health and well-being of people. So, they were certainly role models. And then obviously as my career has progressed, I've had the great fortune to meet a number of people in different spaces that their knowledge and contribution to their spaces have really influenced me. Professor Tom Calmer, a number of other people, Mr. Tom Bridson, who's the CEO of the Gaia Dewey, just their resilience. And I
mm,
think the thing that I did learn was that the only person who can be on your journey is you, and you need to take from your own journey what it is that sustains you and allows you to keep moving forward, and be mindful that there are times where there will be challenges. You may look like you're taking two steps backwards, that these are all part of your own journey, and not to compare yourself to others, because nobody knows what you know, nobody's experienced what you've experienced. And so
mm,
being mindful that whilst we're doing similar things, we are all very unique, and
mm.
creating our own spaces is really important.
Yeah. So we know that you're an advocate for mental health and closing the gender gap, and of course for Aboriginal people. So tell us about your work and your passion around that.
As you said, mental health is something that affects everybody, or mental wellness, social emotional well-being, and being able to, I suppose, act in a space where the ability to talk about mental wellness or mental health issues is really an important factor. We talk about removing the stigma, or allowing people to feel that there is no judgment around moments where they may be mentally unwell, or whether they do engage and experience, a lived experience of a person with a mental illness. And so, it's really something that I think pharmacy more broadly is considering now, which is the mental health of our entire community. But I think being able to look at mental health specifically is really an important factor. And COVID has just shown us how much we need to pay attention to our mental wellness, because it has a huge influence on our physical wellness. It also has a huge influence on how we interact with family, with communities. So, I think being able to be in this space is a privilege, and
Mm,
acknowledging that, we have so much to offer
mhm,
if we are vulnerable. And I think, there are so many things now that you can access online that talks about that ability to be vulnerable, to be
mm,
seen as being vulnerable, so that others can have courage to be as vulnerable as they are at particular moments. So I think being able to work in the mental health space is really important. And, we know that statistically Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, through the impact of colonisation and the ongoing, health inequities that are being faced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and
Mm,
communities, is something that we need to take seriously, and, that they don't become a ticker box, that we
mm,
recognise the importance of creating opportunities to allow all Australians to engage is really critical to our overall health and well-being, but particularly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, as we try and navigate difficult spaces and we try and navigate modernity as well.
mm. What are the things that we can be more mindful of if we decide to find a job around Aboriginal or Torres Island community? What are the things that we can learn, from you so that we can be prepared and to, respect and be mindful when we're serving the people there?
I think the recognition that irrespective of where you are in this country, that you are actually on traditional lands of a
Mm,
nation, knowing what is the name of that nation, who are the traditional
mm,
custodians of the lands in which you are living, working, going to university, is one step. And also
mm,
being mindful that, the health system has played a significant part in the health statistics of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and that you actually do have a lot you can do. Understanding the history of this country since colonisation and the impact is one way. You know, embracing the opportunities to cultural safety, which is now part of APRA regulations for people registered as health professionals through them, that it's really incumbent upon the individual to take some of these journeys on their own, but it's also a responsibility of the educational providers,
mm,
of the profession more broadly, to really start to consider the issues that are impacting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and how we can work with them to try and change some of those statistics, because at the end of each statistic is a human being.
mm,
So, when we talk about the life expectancy or, the comorbidities or chronic illness, that these are actually things that are experienced by people,
mm,
and that, like everything, we want to be considered more than a statistic that needs to be addressed by governments. We want to be more than a statistic that needs to be addressed by the profession. And part of the responsibility of being a pharmacist, as I said, is knowing not just who you are, because that is really important to your own journey. Understanding, you know, your lived experience and how that influences the way you view the world, and what are some of the things that you need to challenge about that lived experience that hasn't been experienced by everyone,
mm,
so that you can consider, you know, what are some of the things that I might need to challenge myself on, and how can I do that allows me not to feel that I own problems? Because, we're not saying that the individuals who are engaged in these services are necessarily responsible for, everything that happens. So it's the leadership that's shown from organisations, the leadership shown through educational providers, to stamp out some of the huge issues that still impact on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and many other minority cultures in this country. And one of the most significant one is racism. The
mm,
racism in our health system is, still rife. And even during this pandemic, it's something that we have seen as an impacting factor on people engaging with the health system. So, that's really something we do need to address. And racism is the experience by the person that is experiencing the racism. It's not about whether the person that they're working with considers themselves to be racist or not, because we are human beings, and if we don't learn through listening to what others tell us about how they respond to the way we're engaging with them, then you know simply saying sorry is not enough.
Mm,
We need to change behaviours, and those change in behaviours need to be seen and felt, I think, before we really start to see some of the changes in our more broader health system and those close the gap targets
mm,
that government has, but also, that the pharmacy profession should be wanting to close as well.
mm. We also know that the Aboriginal and Torres Islanders pharmacy scholarship scheme is something that people are able to apply. So tell us more about this and how to get in, how to apply.
Yeah. Look, I think one of the things that the pharmacy profession has recognised is, you know, we need diversity. And whilst the pharmacy profession is very diverse, you know, that doesn't mean we don't have scope for more.
Mm,
And engaging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to consider pharmacy as a genuine career opportunity that can make a difference is really something that we are doing, and we're improving,
mm,
to try and increase the number of pharmacists that are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. And one of them is the pharmacy scholarships. Whilst there's not a lot of them, there's not a lot being taken either. So we
mm,
know that the uptake of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to pharmacy programs is really still below what we would like, which is, we want to be on parity with our representation in the community, which, the statistics, are around that 3%. What we know in pharmacy is we have less than 1% of
mm,
our pharmacy profession that is made up of inclusion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So, you know, actively promoting that the scholarships exist, working in collaboration to increase the awareness of the fact that these exist, is one thing that we could do better. Working with Indigenous organisations that do have connections across Australia and into communities where the scholarships can be spoken about, advocated for, and then, supported for applicants to submit an application for scholarships is really a critical thing, because what we need to do is, I suppose, capture the imagination of people early about, what's rewarding about being a pharmacist on different levels, and going to that value proposition of being such a valued member of our society and community. I think pharmacy can be proud that we are, you know, amongst the highly trusted professions in the community, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels. We do need to be doing more, and we need to be doing it every day.
mm. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, so for everyone who are listening, so definitely pass this on and share with friends and family. We want more people to be included, and we want to see more of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island pharmacy students around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we certainly do. And I think, as I said, supporting your peers when you are a pharmacy student is a really critical thing, but supporting them to be authentic to who they are, being able to acknowledge their history prior to coming into, a pharmacy program, and making sure that there are those safe spaces where people are able to talk about that without fear of retribution
Mm,
for, a number of different reasons. And as I said, pharmacy is diverse, but we have more opportunities to be more inclusive of that diversity.
mm. Yeah, definitely. So, what are your advice for our aspiring pharmacists, a pharmacy student, intern pharmacists, or early career pharmacists?
Consider rural, remote, and regional. You know, consider that our workforce is geographically dispersed. We're dispersed across a number of industries, and that, don't be blinkered by what you think pharmacy is. Look more broadly at what pharmacy can be and how we
Mm,
influence in so many different spaces. Take opportunities, you know, consider short, medium, and long term aspirations of what you want for yourself, what you want for a family, or how you see yourself engaging in pharmacy as a profession. So I think it's easy when we're in that moment of busyness to not keep looking towards the horizon because it seems such a long way off and so distant. But I think, being mindful that sometimes, you know, maybe not a door's open, but a window's open that you can look out into something a little bit different. And that, working across this beautiful landscape of the Australian country really is something that is unique, and the diversity of those different places really has something to offer. And so, when you're in university and looking for your placements, or where you're considering doing your intern program, don't just look at what's usual. Look at what's unusual. Look at opportunities that, you know, may not have been there in your first year and that get opened up to you as you are going through your pharmacy program, or the opportunity, as I said, to be part of an intern program in some space that you'd never seen yourself before is really something that I ask people to be open to, and acknowledge that sometimes we can find little gems in spaces that, we had never considered before.
As a Aboriginal Torres Island pharmacy student, when you were studying, what was the challenge as a pharmacy student as well as in your pharmacy career?
hmm I suppose the challenge for myself personally as a student was obviously the education that I'd done prior to going to university. But the other part at that time, so, 20 odd years ago, as you said, to become the first Western trained pharmacist, because I'd like to acknowledge that, Indigenous people across the globe and in Australia have practiced pharmacy since they've been connected to their countries, looking at what does the landscape offer them. And, they looked not just to nutritional, but also to the medicinal properties of
Mm.
plants and things, and acknowledging that that existed, but to acknowledge that, even as short as 20 odd years ago, that we didn't have Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people in the profession is really something that's profound. But I think the other part that it did say, and still continues to say to a degree today, is that educational institutions aren't necessarily based in an inclusion criteria. University was, and still to this day, to some degree, is still very much beyond all Australians. It costs a lot. There are a number of different factors, but for me personally, it was certainly the lack of representation. And as I said, now with accreditation and things like that of pharmacy programs across the country, the inclusion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples into the curricula is a critical issue and that is being addressed. But, when I was at university and we had any conversation about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, it was done by a non-Indigenous person to this country.
Mm.
I had a Maori academic who was a wonderful academic, but, when you're speaking to the issues of the First Nations people of the country in which you're planning to define and develop your craft, then it's really difficult for people to truly understand the importance of why I should do this when they're not being taught by the lived experiences of people of why pharmacy is important to our health and well-being.
Mm, definitely. Wow, so it's great that you're here for us, for our future Aboriginal Torres Strait and pharmacy student as role model. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. I mean, I think what, and even myself, is to recognize that whilst we're in the moment, and as you said, many students have part-time jobs and don't probably consider that they are in a privileged space, but with privilege comes responsibility,
Mm,
and we have to acknowledge what that responsibility is, but we also have to act on what that responsibility is. And as I said, start some of those, our actions, as I said, simple things. Usually when I'm on Zoom, for example, your name comes up, I make a point of putting what nation I'm sitting on. And for me, I'm lucky it's a Wiradjuri nation, my nation. But it also then lets us acknowledge the diversity of the nations that is spread across this country and start to consider. And as I said, when people recognize and reflect on their own lived experiences and the influences that that has, then they're able to go, okay, when I embrace this responsibility, I'm going to do something with it.
Thank you so much, Faye, for this wonderful discussion. We learned so much, and just thank you so much for being the role model here for us, for our future pharmacy students, and to understand more about the First Nation, more about our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ali. And I just, really do acknowledge that the space is being opened up more to create more knowledge around the inclusion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples into the professions as a professional themselves, but also the embracing of First Nations communities and how do we work effectively within our communities to try and be the change that we want to see and be very much part of a change that we need for our future.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Your Pharmacy Career podcast, proudly brought to you by Ravens Recruitment, Australia's leading specialist pharmacy recruitment agency. If you enjoyed this episode and know anyone else who you think would benefit from it, we would be grateful if you could share it with them. Together, we help even more pharmacists develop a career and life they love. If you have any questions or suggestions about future podcast episodes, please reach out to us via email info@ravensrecruitment.com.au.